the amount of information that's generated and put out into the world on a single day is more than the information that was published into the universe in the entire human history up until the...
What can young people do to exercise that curiosity muscle?
Is that I say minds are like a parachute. They work best when they're open.
But then it means obviously with this AI world that we find ourselves in, there's some opportunities, right?
Well, when something new comes along, no one's got experience. So the playing field's level. You know, a good friend of mine has a family member who's a radiologist. And he was telling me that...
You also touched on, during your speech, you know, just capacity and character.
Yeah. So I called it capacity or character because it's also got a C. It just goes quite nice that you got these...
So if you think about it, it's the 4 C's of success.
The 4 C's.
How important it is, you know, particularly from a business perspective and for someone who's got ambitions of being an entrepreneur and running business.
So people buy people.
It's Pat on brands. Watch how you brand it, man. A pat on the back is a pat from the man. Better be branded, man. A pat from the pat is a pat on the brand. If it's enormous.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to yet another exciting episode of the Pat on Brands podcast with me, Pat Mahlangu. Today, we have a very special guest, I must say, Andre Grobler. I must say, starting this podcast, I didn't imagine myself having a conversation with you. And I'll tell you why. For those that obviously are avid viewers of this podcast, you know every now and then there's a name that comes up, Bilal Aesop, who was my mentor, still is rather my mentor, one of my longest standing mentors, to be exact. It's a relationship that started 15 years ago. And I remember the first time I officially met Bilal, he gave me a book that I always recommend, you know, to my fellow or budding entrepreneurs, just around how to manage and lead people. And the book was called Wheelbarrows Have to Be Pushed. And it had 9 quadrants.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, blocks, and you had tomatoes, you had rocks, you had top dogs, you know, in that, and all of them needed to be managed sort of differently. And that book was written by the one and only Andre Grobler. And here we are 15 years later. Yeah. I'm having a conversation with him. Welcome to the Pat on Brands podcast.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here. A new experience for me.
Yeah, I know you're not in the limelight a lot. Actually, never in the limelight. You're always doing the hard work, you know, but I think it will be beneficial, you know, to introduce people to Andre Grobler. Who is Andre Grobler?
I'll do my best.
Yeah.
Is that a question?
Yes. Yeah.
I suppose the context of being here, Pat, is I've been a business entrepreneur for over 20 years, and always had a flair for business even before that. And along all of this, most of these businesses have involved the employment of large numbers of people, field forces, outsourced field forces. And it's given me an amazing insight into humans in the place of work. And more recently, working with Time Bank,
yes,
in our business, where we set out on a deliberate mission to employ young people who've never had a job as the face of a bank. Now that doesn't sit well with investors. When you moot that,
it doesn't inspire confidence.
You know, no, thank you. It's even better description than I could have given.
Yeah.
And in fact, if I could tell you the expletives that were used, you know, I couldn't repeat them on a podcast, but people thought I was, it just wasn't going to work. Nevertheless, you look at Time Bank today, you see the incredible success.
Sure.
And, you know, we've hired through the business over the last 7 odd years, probably over 6,000 young people changed their lives.
Yeah.
But to do that, we've evaluated, interviewed, assessed. The number's probably over 1 million young people. And that again, and it leads into what we're talking about today, has given me some unusual insights into young people. Some of the challenges they face in today, the modern world of people. So whilst I'm no psychologist or studier of human behavior, the observations have been too consistent.
Interesting. We're gonna get
to coincidence.
We're gonna get to that part, but I want us to also take a step back. And something that's also quite interesting is that as we record this a podcast, less than 24 hours ago,
yes,
there's a big announcement around the lottery, in terms of the appointment of the new operators. But you are one of the first, actually, you were the first guy from an operations perspective, that brought lottery to South Africa. Yeah. How was that experience?
It's the one thing that makes one sound quite famous, because when you say the National Lottery, everybody sits up, oh, the National Lottery, I know what that is.
Yeah, yeah.
And it goes back to somewhere in the mid-90s, somewhere 95, 96, I don't recall exactly.
Yeah.
But I was running a number of businesses that deployed people into the field, doing a variety of tasks.
Yeah.
And I came across an American company doing investigations here in South Africa for our first national lottery. Before we even knew we were going to have a lottery. Sure. There wasn't legislation, it wasn't yet formulated, etc. But they knew it was coming, and they were doing early investigations. And we connected well. I persuaded them that I could probably help them by doing some field work and helping them understand the lay of the land in South Africa and so on. I then persuaded the company I worked for to send me all over America to look at different lottery operations, see how does it actually work.
Yeah.
And somehow I managed to persuade these fellows that I would do work for them at cost in preparing their bid for the lottery.
Wow.
If in return they would guarantee me the contract for field marketing if they won.
Whoa.
And we shook hands on that deal, and that's what happened.
Wow.
And so the consortium was called Utingo.
Uh-huh.
And that lottery launched in 2000.
Sure.
And I set up a dedicated company for them, and it was called Lottery Field Marketing. Not very creative, but quite descriptive, I suppose. And its job was to go and sign up and secure contracts with retailers throughout South Africa. It was 4,500 at that time.
I must say that just on the field marketing aspect of, if you look at the broader marketing world, right, is the least sort of glamorous one.
It's not sexy at all. In fact, I have a wonderful presentation that I often show people.
Yeah.
And it's good ideas or things start with concept.
Uh-huh.
Okay? We're going to have a new product or a new service or a lottery.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the concept. Then it goes to design. Yeah, it's going to work like this. We're going to do this. It's going to have the next thing, et cetera, et cetera. Then they go to build it. They create it and put it all together and what have you.
Yeah.
And that's where all the money goes. That's where the investment goes. The excitement, all the sexiness, all the ponytails are involved in that stuff. Then it comes to distribution and implementation.
Uh-huh.
You can't buy a lottery ticket. Well, you certainly couldn't then. If there wasn't a terminal in a retail store that worked and somebody who could operate it.
Uh-huh.
We call that the moment of truth. But getting that terminal in there, training that person, filling in forms, nobody wants to do that. And they don't think about it in the beginning. Yeah. Because I will get to that stuff later. That's for the ordinary people.
Yeah.
And then when that time arrives, everyone starts going, oh dear, what are we going to do now?
Yeah.
So, so be it. But field marketing is, there's opportunities by doing what other people don't want to do.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I didn't want to be an undertaker. So I went into field marketing because people don't want to do that either, but they make a lot of money doing that.
Yeah.
And in fact, the term field marketing is not well known as.
Absolutely.
Probably no.
Yeah, like I say, I mean, obviously, as I mentioned in my intro, I mean, I'm at Bilal doing promotions for when you had the LG account. I remember the day. I mean, we were at Eastgate. And in came Michelle, and she was just energetic. I thought to myself, this is what I want to do. And 15 years later, here I am in the marketing space, and all thanks to Innovate for giving me the opportunity. Sometimes I always tell even in my team that most opportunities are not dressed in
quite agree.
Suit and tie. You just have to be on the ground and just be willing to learn, and which then brings me to the crux of our conversation. Which then was sort of sparked by a a series of social media posts that I saw about a talk, that you gave at Jeppe High School, where you spoke about some of the sort of less comfortable truths, particularly when it comes to young people, the world of work, and obviously entrepreneurship. Do you just want to give a context, sort of a background around that talk? Because I feel like as we are entering Youth Month, we also need to hear from the legends, from the people that really, walked the journey and did the hard yards and and made a success of themselves.
Yeah, so Jeppe High School for Boys is my alma mater.
Okay.
I attended and I've been very involved in the school. It's a fabulous school. It was my place. And the headmaster invited me to address the prize giving, the annual prize giving, which is quite dangerous for a naughty boy to be invited back to the school.
Well, you're naughty.
And I had a wonderful time, let's put it that way. But I had an open agenda. I said, what would resonate with these boys? And I said, you just talk to them. It'll work, whatever you've got to say, a little bit of trust there. Nevertheless, I sort of agonized. I thought, what do you say to young people in this modern world,
Also, they know too much. They're overexposed.
And they're young. What do I know? And I mean, when I was young, what did my parents know at the time? And so, I really just thought, the observations that I've had of these young people that we've employed and the difference between them and, I suppose, my generation. And also, I've got family, I've got friends. I've seen their young people. I'm talking young adolescents. And I've seen the struggles. They're having a difficult time. And I thought, let me talk to them about what they can expect from this world of work when they emerge into it. And, what do I think they could do to overcome it? And so that was the context of
the talk.
Was what could I give them that would help them be ready for the future? In fact, I called it being future ready.
Being future ready. I thought you said cut. Oh, okay. Yeah. So you then spoke about a lot of things. Because there was this social media post, a long one, and I'm like, yo, this person was paying attention to what Andrew was saying. But you spoke about the power of just young people being curious. But before you answer my question, obviously there's this notion, right now, and you also see it even in organizations where whether you come 10th or first place, you almost sort of treated equal. We need to celebrate. They call it, is it A for effort? Because you showed up, therefore we must clap for you as well. Yeah. What's your take on that?
So, in fact, my opening comment was it was a prize giving, and it was recognizing excellence and effort.
Yeah,
and I'd commented. In fact, in one of the books I'd written, I'd commented about matric results and this obsession in South Africa with matric results, and how I didn't think it was preparing young people for work anyway. But nevertheless, it's important. You've got to do something.
Yeah.
But back in about 2009, I laid my hands on some statistics. On pass rates by groups of subject. And the pass rates were dismal in maths, science, accountancy, things that have some sort of real value in the business world. They were sort of mediocre to average in other things, which are first language or second language. And all the passes were in other subjects that really have no value to business at all. And so this whole thing of getting a pass rate and acknowledging it when not only is the pass rates poor, or low, should I say, the subjects kids are choosing. And that's not spoken about. So we're producing, I think, poor quality people into the workplace, for starters. And then we're patting everyone on the back. You got a matric pass, well done. And meantime, you've got a whole lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And I made the comment that, I think we are rewarding mediocrity, not excellence.
Yeah.
And I said, too often I see, little Johnny gets a gold medal for coming 10th, egg and spoon race. And this resonated with somebody who said, I've had to give these awards to Johnny. Parents pressure me to give something.
Because poor Johnny showed up.
Because he showed up with the right body temperature, and I think that's some sort of an achievement.
Sure.
And I'm not knocking fairness and all that.
Yeah.
But when you reward mediocrity, you do not encourage progress and excellence. And I said, I feel our education system is a little bit like limbo dancing. You lower the bar continually, and every time someone gets underneath it, you applaud them. We should be in high jump. We should be raising that bar every time and only applauding when people get over it. And that seemed to touch a nerve, because I honestly think we're accepting mediocrity in a world when we need excellence.
Yeah. That's very profound, that which you are saying, and I think it starts in high school, for example. Then that sort of characteristic then shows up at work as well.
Yes, it does.
Because someone showed up in the morning, therefore, that's good enough. But when you start then saying, hey, I want excellence, this is the only standard that we have within our organization, then they start saying the environment is toxic.
Spot on.
Have you ever had such an experience?
I have.
You've hired a lot of people.
We experience this continually, and I'll speak about it just a little later.
Yeah.
Is the lack of resilience. And people surrender the moment things get a bit tough and standards are expected. But there's reasons behind that, I'm sure. But that's the honest truth is, I see capitulation and surrender continually the moment these expectations of higher standards.
But let's talk about curiosity, because I think any young person, or I've got a daughter, they're very curious about, stuff. They're asking why this, why must. But I realize also, as people get older, they even stop becoming curious. But what's special about being a curious person, particularly as a young person?
Yeah. So it's a quality that I found. If you talk entrepreneurship or the future, etc. And you'll get other words for this.
Yeah.
But curiosity is that itching in the brain, that mind that says, I wonder, what if, could I, should it be like this? Why is it like that? And curiosity is natural in young people, and it dissipates over time because people are, in the modern world, we are passive. It just information comes to us.
Yeah.
Don't need to find out anymore.
Sure.
And when I was young, we were curious because we didn't have information. So we wondered about a lot of things.
Oh.
TV only arrived in this country when I was in high school.
Yeah.
If you wanted to know something, you went to the library and you looked it up.
Or
if you were lucky, you had Encyclopedia Britannica at home. But you looked for something, you had to search.
Yeah.
And we were given assignments at school to do something. You had to go and do a whole lot of research. You couldn't Google it or AI it with ChatGPT and get the answer.
Yeah.
South Africa was isolated, so we didn't have international information.
Yeah.
No TV channels, a couple of newspapers, some owned by the nationalist government. If you read the one and you read the other, completely different. And so I think there was just a natural desire to know more. We didn't know what it was like in other countries, I wonder what it's like in America. I hear this, I hear that.
Yeah.
And so if we wanted to know something, we had to look for it.
Sure. Yeah. And now, today we have ChatGPT. I was telling one of my team members that, in as much as it's great to have such a tool that, enables you to get stuff done in the quickest possible time, but also find that, I'm becoming less patient in a way. And also sometimes, and I had to be sort of conscious about it, right? That I'm also denying myself an opportunity to learn in the process, because everything just comes.
Yeah.
And I also read somewhere that actually, instead of becoming smarter by having such tools at our disposal, we're actually becoming dumber, and even the physical size of our brains is shrinking.
I think you're right. It's interesting to say we're becoming dumber. Information is so easily available today. and it comes at one. You sit passively and you receive.
Sure.
And you don't have to search for it.
Yeah.
So, and I think what it does is it creates a false belief in young people, particularly, that they are competent and knowledgeable. The ability to access a fact doesn't make you smart. And so if you tried hard enough, you could probably get a list of all the parts of a car.
Sure.
And you wouldn't have a clue what that car looked like.
Yeah.
You know, it's like knowing all the parts of a jigsaw puzzle, but not knowing what it should look like when it's assembled. So accessing singular facts sounds very smart. But you know what? I can do it. You can do it. Anybody can do it as long as you got access to some bit of a tool, and that's ubiquitous today. And so I find, in my experience with young, and I'm thinking now generalizing with young people, is that the ease and availability of information has prevented them from solving problems. Because they don't put together the parts of the puzzle to solve something. So I could ask, X, Y, Z, they'll give me an answer, or they'll get it.
Yeah.
You ask something else and you say, well, what do those things mean together? And they just kind of go, I don't know, I've given you the answers.
Yeah.
And you'll find this, I've certainly experienced it in the business, that the ability to string together a pile of facts into a solution to a problem is quite scarce.
But then what can we do, Andre? I mean, AI is not going anywhere. No, actually, it's going to get more advanced and advanced as days go by. But what can young people do to exercise that curiosity muscle?
So my advice to these young people that I spoke to, and to any young people, is that I say minds are like a parachute. They work best when they're open. Oof. And so when you start to develop a curiosity, just keep asking, is that true? I wonder about that. You won't be drawn into fake news like you are. I often talk to people, they go, did you hear about? And I go, but didn't you think that sounded a bit off?
Yeah.
Well, I read it somewhere. And that's because people don't question. So, I encourage it in the business, question everything. Be a bit rebellious. I know teachers don't like that when I say that, but it's this kind of say, but why is that so? And I find whenever we query things, why is that? But why? Is it necessary? More often than not, you uncover something.
Wow.
And it's because...
So you're peeling.
Yeah, well, when people don't ask questions, that's when they get caught in scams. That's why we believe fake news. And that's why we got it's called What's Crap, South Africa. I get all this nonsense stuff that comes up. That's why, why do Americans believe we got a genocide of white farmers? You know, we all know stuff because we're asking questions. But when people don't ask questions, so it's you can develop a curiosity by being conscious. Yeah. And, you'll read a lot and hear a lot in the modern times about saying lifelong learning. When I was young, you chose a career and that was kind of what it was going to be. And you learned something and it lasted you a long time. That's all changed, and, and so I just think the ability to ask questions, to wonder about things is the thing that will allow you to see things that others don't. Sure. People often say, but Andre, how did you see that? Why did you know about that? And I wish I was so smart. But it's because I sometimes ask, I wonder if there isn't something there. Yeah. And that causes you to see stuff that others don't.
So curiosity is very important.
I know they say, what's it? Curiosity killed the cat, but I could probably find some other clever thing for that about. Curiosity is what will allow you to see opportunity.
Curiosity is what will allow you to see opportunity. I think that's very profound. But also at the same time, times have changed. And I think we also finding ourselves in a fast changing environment. Things are moving at a very high speed. It's like the plane is 3,000 above sea level and is moving at 1,000 kilometers per hour. But how do we keep up, with this change in the environment that we find ourselves in? And also, what do we do when we are faced with certain changes in what we do?
So, I mean, we all know humans don't like change. It makes us uncomfortable. We like what we know. We like what we used to. And it's naturally disturbing to humans. Yeah. But, change just comes faster and faster and faster. And, I keep hankering back, when I was young and emerging into the world of work, etc., change was exciting because it was more predictable. It was happening. But you could kind of predict it. It was going to be there. There'd be new things. When I was in high school, people were saying, go into computers. That's the thing of the future, you know. And that was exciting. So that's the route we'll take.
Yeah. You studied IT, yeah?
Yeah, I did, you know, long way away from where it is today.
Yeah.
But, you know, if you just think about the rate of change and how different it is, if you take technology, in my lifetime, we started off, there were big mainframes of computers that needed big rooms.
I only read
and
about
cooling and raised floor, etc. You know,
and a computer was like in a room,
massive, drew power and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
You know, then came PCs. They were smaller, but we used diskettes. So we've been through PCs, diskettes, hard disks, stiffy drives, hard, solid state drives, laptops, tablets.
Sure.
You know, through to where we are today, where it's in the cloud, you know, and the phone and all the computing. So massive change, but that took 50 years, Pat.
Sure.
Okay? Well, a whole lot easier to keep pace with change over 50 years. You know, music.
It's gradual.
No different.
Yeah.
You know, I started off, we had a tape recorder at home. You were cool, you know, radio tape, cassette tape or a radiogram that played records, big thing. You know? And then we went through, you know, CDs came. Then came, DVDs. Then came memory sticks, or what are they, MP3 players, and then iPods.
The iPods,
you know, and today we've got streaming and just on demand, Spotify, what have you. Again, that's taken 50 years.
Sure.
So, you know, so when you've got that kind of change, you know, it's fairly comfortable and it's exciting and you can keep pace. Today, you know, we have no idea what the speed of it's going to be. And I read some stat the other day that said the amount of information that's generated and put out into the world through social media, whatever, published into the world that's available on a single day is more than the information that was published into the universe in the entire human history up until the end of the 20th century. Yeah.
Sure,
and I also,
crazy
and again, I read these things on ChatGPT, but I also read that it's predicted that human knowledge, or the knowledge available to humans, doubles every 12 hours.
Sure.
Now, how do you keep track with that change? It's terrifying. It's intimidating.
Yeah.
And so you'll hear lifelong learning. You know, curiosity, I think, is lifelong learning. It's just saying, I want to keep in touch with all of these things.
Sure.
And so, you know, instead of being terrified by change, first thing is you have to get comfortable with discomfort. Change brings discomfort. And if you wobble and run for cover, well, you'll be a victim to it. And you'll often hear, you need to accept change.
Yeah.
I'd like to take it one further.
Yeah.
You should exploit change. Because the opportunities lie in new stuff. And when the major thing I hear from young people is, everybody wants experience and I don't have experience. Well, when something new comes along, no one's got experience. So the playing field's level. So the opportunities, once again, lie in the new stuff, and the new stuff comes when there's change. So if it's a mindset, if people can learn to say, hey, I'm waiting for change, and every time it comes, I'm going to look at it. Because if your mind is open and you're curious, you'll see opportunities. And if you embrace change, you'll see where those opportunities are and where they lie. So I think those two are coupled on the tote.
Got you. But then it means, obviously, with this AI world that we find ourselves in, there's some opportunities, right?
Well, I mean, AI is brand new, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, and there's a major opportunity for young people because there's no old people experiencing AI. So if you get in first, you're the leader. And I'm sure there'll be many more things, you know, and I know very little about AI other than it's damn useful and I'm starting to learn about it. But so the exploitation of AI, and not just looking into it for your answers, but as a career, you know, and I mean, you talk about change. There's careers today that never existed, Pat. Not when you started working, certainly not when they're brand new. We never heard about social media managers, etc.
Digital content creators.
It never existed. So these things are brand new, and there's jobs that will go. They'll be displaced by AI. We know that. And that's going to happen all the time. And I don't know what comes next. You know? But I'll have my eyes open.
And you'll exploit some of the opportunities.
In your half chance, I will.
That come with it. Actually, I read somewhere that, you know, I mean, they say AI won't replace humans, but people with AI knowledge will replace those that don't.
Yep. So, I mean, there'll be careers in AI for those who develop these things, write them. I don't know how these engines all work.
Yeah.
There'll be whole careers in that. And there'll be careers in the usage of AI in other things. There's not a career in just accessing AI because anybody can do that.
Absolutely.
It's how do you exploit it? And I don't think we've even scratched the surface on what this is going to be. And, in fact, I was in a bookstore with my wife on the weekend and I bought a book. The name was something like How to Overcome Your Anxiety of AI. Well, but when I looked on the business section, there were several books on AI.
Yeah.
So it's brand new, but people are bringing out books about it already.
Yeah.
So I think there'll come a time not too soon when it's just a major.
Yeah. I mean, also, if you look at the evolution of AI, I mean, I read somewhere that it started in 2004, around about then. Then it only sort of leapfrogged in 2022, 2023 with generative AI.
Yeah.
And fast forward now to 2025, we're talking about agentic AI, where now you can build agents that can perform certain tasks, which is
incredible.
Yeah.
So, again, it must be frightening to young people to say, is a computer going to replace me? Is AI going to replace me?
Yeah.
And AI will replace many things. There's no doubt about that. A good friend of mine has a family member who's a radiologist. And he was telling me that, AI can examine an X-ray and compare it to millions of others in an instant.
Yeah.
Whereas a radiologist has to use only what they've ever seen to make a judgment. So that's just an illustration of saying, will it replace everything? I don't know what and when, but there are many things that AI is just going to be so much better at than humans.
Sure.
But yeah.
Interesting.
I'm glad to be old.
You don't have to deal with all this drama that comes with AI. Then the other thing you touched on, was the power of communication and just building meaningful connections with other human beings. I mean, we're talking about AI. Actually, interestingly, earlier today I was having a conversation with a friend who's in employment and he's looking to sort of jump ship into entrepreneurship, and he was just telling me that, last night I even had a chat with ChatGPT and ChatGPT said to me, I need to have more faith.
Oh, really?
Yeah, people are seeking advice from machines, but what's the power, just around communication and just building meaningful human connections?
So, the modern world allows us to, I'm going to use the word communicate loosely, to pass information between people very easily. So you've got email and you've got all of these things, but communicating and connecting with another person is a completely different matter. And why should we communicate and connect? Well, and you can. There's a lot of information about this, how careers and jobs of the future are going to lean much more towards humanities. People with empathy, people with leadership capability, people with problem-solving skills, and so on and so forth. And that requires interpersonal skills. If you want to communicate with someone, you can send them an email, you can send them a text. And young people today, they communicate.
Send you an emoji.
Fast with an emoji or LOL or whatever these acronyms are that people use.
Yeah.
There's no tone, there's no emotion, there's no emphasis. It's just text. You don't know if it's a compliment or an insult sometimes, the way that it happens. So nothing in that way of communicating is building good interpersonal skills. In fact, the opposite. Sure. Because young folk are sitting with a screen and they're not having to deal with face-to-face. And, we've got all these young people we employ in the business and they have to deal with customers directly. And they have to deal often with irate customers. And that's why our selection process is so tough and why so few get through it, because we struggle to find people with the necessary interpersonal skills to deal face-to-face with somebody. They want to send an email, but now you have to deal.
But I must say, though, just on that point, one of the greatest benefits of having done promotions is the ability to communicate with people. I'll randomly approach anyone in the shop and say, hey, are you interested in buying an LG phone? This is the V360. These are the features. You know, I give credit, even dealing with rejection.
Yes.
You know, because I mean, now being an entrepreneur, every now and then,
Absolutely.
I have to pitch and sell ideas and ask for sponsorship for some of the initiatives that I run. And I get more rejection or letters of regret than, you know, congratulations, we are on board, you know. And I mean, it can be sometimes quite disheartening,
It is.
you know, to be rejected at scale, right? But that experience I had with promotions, and I remember I always tell the story even on the platform, because I was one of the first, one would say, promoters of Huawei. When Huawei launched in the country, I mean, through Innovate, I used to promote those phones, and people used to laugh at me and say, "What is this? Is Hawaii?" They couldn't even pronounce it, you know.
Yeah.
And then they'll ask you, "Where is Huawei made?" Then you say, "It's from China." They're like, "Oh no, it's from Hong Kong." What do Chinese know about making phones? But here we are, almost 15 years later. Huawei is one of the renowned brands, you know. But at that time, it was laughable, you know, to promote such a brand. But I had to, you know, take it in and take it in like a champ. So yeah.
Well, not everybody gets those opportunities. Now, I don't know if you were confident before you did it, or if it built your confidence, or maybe a bit of both. It's a bit of a spiral.
Yeah.
But you know, I would urge any parent of a young adolescent to read a book that I read recently. It's called The Anxious Generation. An author by the name of Jonathan Haidt. If you Google Anxious Generation, you'll find it.
Okay.
Very quickly.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, I don't know if it's the title or the subtitle that says how the great rewiring of youth has led to an epidemic of mental illness. Okay? And he shows the statistics since 2010. Funny enough, we're talking the 15 years since we've been doing stuff.
Yeah.
Which is when smartphones really became widespread, ubiquitous.
Yeah.
The incredible growth. It's more than doubled in youth. The rates of suicide, self-harm, levels of anxiety, depression, the abandonment of adult activities, things like socializing, drinking alcohol, maybe that's good, even having sex, because of the screen-based childhoods. So the whole thing goes into how we've replaced a play-based childhood with a screen-based childhood. And if you grew up anything like I did, we played as kids and you learned stuff. Yeah. Because you couldn't send a nasty email to someone. You had to tell them to their face if you wanted them to know, and you ran the risk of consequences.
Okay.
So our interpersonal skills were built on the playground.
Yeah.
And so was our understanding of all kinds of things, hierarchy, subservience, leadership, etc. And I found it to be profound in what it has done. And it showed that the rates in young girls, much higher than boys.
Yeah.
And it lays almost solidly at the door of social media interaction and the relentlessness of bullying and all. I mean, everybody knows these things.
Yeah.
But that book just brought home the enormity of the challenges faced by young people today with mental anguish. And I see this in the people we employ. I see it in the children of my friends. I see it all around me. You may have similar experiences.
Yeah.
And I would, if I had any advice, and I did give this to the parents of young adolescents, get a look at that book and see how you can change away from just this overwhelming screen-based.
Yeah. Just also taking a step back just around communication, you know, I once had that Warren Buffett, you know, after completing his business studies at uni, he went on to do a course in communication, you know, how important it is, you know, particularly from a business perspective and for someone who's got ambitions of being an entrepreneur and running business.
So people buy people. And you're an entrepreneur yourself. You know what it's like. You are always selling yourself and you're selling your business, you're selling your services.
Yeah.
And if you can't persuade somebody that your idea is good, that your service is good, that what you have to sell is valued, you're going to struggle. You can't send out flyers all the time. So you can get a speech of ChatGPT to write you a beautiful speech.
It does, believe me.
But you have to deliver that.
Yeah.
And people don't buy that speech if you deliver it poorly. So the ability to speak to people or groups of people, critical to sell yourself. You need it if you want a job. You're going to get interviewed. You can send a CV. That's easy. You're going to ask ChatGPT. It will give you a beautiful CV. Someone's going to interview you.
Yeah.
And they're going to talk to you. And
That's
if you can't communicate, it's the moment of truth. If you can swipe, I don't know which way you swipe because I'm not on Tinder. At least I'm not going to own up to it if I am.
Yeah.
But whatever you swipe, you see people, whatever. You can find a date digitally. But at some point, you're going to have to show up and talk to this person. Yeah. And if you got a great idea because you saw it and you embraced the change, and you want to get someone to invest in this great idea, best you go and persuade some investor.
Wow.
And you draft a beautiful proposal. Someone wants to talk to you about it.
Yeah.
So whether you want a board of directors to hire you or to promote you, whether you want an investor, whether you want someone to marry you, or even if you want the police to let you go because you've done something, the ability to speak well, to communicate, to convey ideas to others is probably one of the greatest gifts any entrepreneur could have.
Wow. And I mean, just when we were in our previous conversations, I mean, you spoke about, especially when you worked on the lottery, for example, then you went on to do something with Standard Bank. And today you still do business with the guys that you worked with at Standard Bank and who are now the founders of what is now known as Time Bank. How do you sustain, relationships for so long?
It's probably, it's not something that I do out of, maybe it's just the upbringing, the interpersonal skills we learned along the way.
Yeah.
I just also have a natural blessing to get along with people fairly well.
Yeah.
But it stood me in very, very good stead, I can tell you.
Yeah.
I've said to people, would you take me serious if I pitched for your business? And the answer was, yeah, sure.
Sure.
Because people buy people. And if you can't articulate, if you can't be convincing and persuasive, well, you'll certainly struggle as an entrepreneur, that's for sure.
So now when we talk about, we spoke about curiosity, in which you explained so eloquently, then change, ability to adapt, when you face this change and exploit it, not just adapt, but exploit the change. Then communication and obviously having the ability to just, build meaningful connections. And you also touched on during your speech, just capacity and character.
Yeah. That's the main one, to be honest. So I called it capacity or character because it's also got a C. It just goes quite nice that you got these.
So if you think about it, it's the 4 C's of success.
4 C's. That's terrible. Anyway, we're talking about resilience. We're talking about, grit. And that's...
In Afrikaans we say it's fierce.
Fierce. It's the ability to hang in there. Because no matter what you do, nothing worthwhile is going to be easy. Because if it's easy, somebody else does it. And they won't pay you much money for it.
And everybody will do it.
So, if you want to go for something that's tough, best you have some resilience. And, I spoke to these young people about the world I entered into versus the world they're about to enter. When I left school, Pat, in 1976, I finished, we went straight into the army as young white guys in this country.
Sure.
Okay? And, you may forget the reasons, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
It was tough. It was a proper army, and you ended up in a place where the state owned you. And there was this guy called a corporal, the lowest rank in the army besides you, because you were, just nothing.
Yeah.
They owned you. And, in no time at all, you realized that, you were in the army. And you had no choice. The only other choices we had was you could flee the country.
Okay.
You could spend 4 years in jail, or you could just suck it up and do your military service.
Yeah.
That toughened us up a little bit. Not everybody's cup of tea, but it was very good for us. Schools had corporal punishment. If we did something wrong, you got lashed. There was no hearings or what are they?
Commissions of inquiry.
No appeals process. The only appeal was, please don't hurt me. You got lashed. Whether you're guilty or not. That's what. And we learned it as a badge of honor. We marked it on our blazer. A bit like a fighter pilot. Look at what I did. But that was how life was. You were tough. There was bullying in the play. It wasn't cool. You had to know which way to walk home because where the good guys and the bad guys were.
Sure.
And I guess these things were building resilience. We built toughness because we had to deal with stuff.
Yeah.
Military service is gone. Corporal punishment is gone. Major anti-bullying campaigns are gone.
Yeah.
Okay? But what have we replaced it with? To give young people something to toughen. Because resilience isn't something you're born with, You
build over time.
You need to build, you need to build character. But as parents, we don't want our kids to suffer.
Sure.
So what do? We jump in and we help these kids. We protect them. And if you look at the modern, I keep saying the modern world, but the world today, parents, they side with the teacher when there's trouble. They side with the police when there's trouble. You've got kids of 30, 40 still living at home because parents don't want their kids to hurt, and they not encourage them to go off and fly. And it's called helicopter parenting. They're stepping in to help all the time. And what happens is we protect them physically. You can't ride a bicycle without a helmet. We just crashed into each other.
But I must say,
fell and bled, and
a helmet once saved my life. I remember one of my major, cycling accidents. I hit I landed on the ground with my head. Had I not worn a helmet, I would have been gone.
I don't know anybody who had a helmet as a kid. It might explain a lot about some of us today.
Yeah.
But parents, the playground must have a soft thing. You've got to go on a supervised play date. All this kind of stuff. So physically, enormous protectionism. If there's such a word. Digitally, almost none. You can get a Twitter account or whatever these things are. You can get onto pornographic sites. All you have to say is that you're 18 or 16 or whatever it is.
Yeah, say I'm 18 plus.
Yeah, there you are. And parents aren't protecting us from this. Anyway, but that's a completely different matter.
Yeah.
So this resilience, this ability to bounce back from adversity, is somewhat lacking because I think we're not putting enough obstacles in young people's way. And it doesn't have to be harmful or hurtful.
Yeah.
It's doing things that scare you, Pat. Okay? It's go and make a speech when you're terrified to speak publicly. I've seen it. Go and try and run a road race, train for a marathon, train for 5 kilometers. Doesn't matter. Something you never thought you could do.
Yeah.
Okay? And I've noticed every time.
And I guess, sorry to interject there, talking about marathons, I'm by the time I guess this airs, I'll be a few days away from.
You're going to be running a comrades next week. Good luck to you. Good luck to you. Yes.
I'll be running my first comrades, and people ask me, like, why do you run? What are you running away from? And for me, it's about challenging myself. Because like I said earlier on, access to information has become so easy. Everything is just a button, a click away. But running, no one can run for me. And also, it's one goal personally that I have 100% control over. I'm not waiting for someone's approval to say, "Oh, your proposal was great. Let's do the work." This is me waking up at 4 a.m., 4:30 a.m. in this winter, dark hours, and going to train. And I found that, even from a mental health perspective, it has done good. So, I just wanted to share that.
I've got a book for you on it, by the way.
Yeah.
I forgot to bring you one.
Sure. Okay.
Have it.
Yeah.
So what it does, though, is when you put yourself over your head and you claw your way out of that, you start believing, I can do this. And after a period of time, you go, that wasn't so bad. I'll do it again. Okay? So
I can do one up.
I'll do the next run. It's just a down run.
Yeah.
Then you'll go, okay, I'll. You won't say that for a day or two. Then you'll recover and you'll feel quite cool. and you'll say that.
Yeah, you ran comrades. How many?
Yeah, I did. I finished 12 of them.
12?
Over the years. But for the same reason, you start to believe, hey, I can do this. And if you do tough things, it's a spiral. If you do something that's difficult and you accomplish it, your self-belief grows. And then you take on something else and you do it in yourself and it goes up. The reverse happens if you if you let yourself fail at something or you don't do something. It erodes your self-esteem because you don't challenge yourself to do something difficult.
Yeah.
That's my challenge to young people. Just do difficult stuff. Put yourself out there.
Yeah. Do hard
chance.
things.
You know?
Yeah.
And when you do it, you go, hey, that's where confidence comes from. And so this development of resilience, we're not born with it, but it can be nurtured. And character's not built in comfort and ease. It's built in,
tough situations.
Metal gets harder in fire. That's where it gets hardened. So
I always say to my team, they're like, "Oh, you always have these punchlines, Pat, but pressure creates diamonds."
Thank you. I'll remember that. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So, but some people, are fearful. There might be someone who's watching this right now and be like, "Okay, I hear you, Andre. But where do I start? How do I start being curious? How do I start exploiting change? Is there like a quick sort of cheat code, as they call it, the young ones to really fully apply the 4 C's as if you think about it, that's what they are, to really have a meaningful life, as a young person. Yes, you might not have everything figured out, but as you journey along this life, what can I do maybe in the next hour or 2 or even tomorrow after having digested all this content? And just, Yeah,
I wish I had the sort of little medicine spoon to give to someone. Say, so you take 2 of these and you'll be okay.
Yeah.
But Pat, you might be aware of what they refer to as the 4 levels of competence. The lowest level is called unconscious incompetence. That's when you don't even know that you don't know. The next level is called conscious incompetence. That's when you start going, oh, I realize I don't know. Then you get conscious competence. That's when you can do something as long as you're really trying and thinking about it. And unconscious competence is when you do it on autopilot.
That's conscious.
Unconscious competence means you're competent without even thinking about it.
Wow.
If you take driving a car, a young person will say, I'm going to drive a car. They don't even know that they don't know how to drive that car until they get in the car.
Yeah.
And then they stall and So now they've moved from unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence. They go, oh, I don't know. But I know, now I know that I don't know.
Sure.
If I where's my starting point to people? Is you've now moved from unconscious incompetence maybe to conscious incompetence. I now know that I should be curious.
That
I should work on my skills.
Yeah.
So if nothing else, it's unlocking that aha moment of going, okay, I realize there's some things. Then you can start to say, well, what do I do about it? I don't have the recipe for everyone. Curiosity, well, open your mind. Start looking at different things. Okay? I know people who watch a great deal of TV. They can't tell me what happened in America, but they can tell me who the Kardashians are married to. Okay? So it's fine. Watch the Kardashians or whatever it is. Okay, Days of Our Lives. I don't know. Look at the news too. Read a newspaper. Pick up a book. Pick up a magazine. Find various sources of information. Talk to more people, and you'll find the world of information just opens up to you.
Yeah.
And the more you understand, the more curious you become. So start.
And watch the Pat and Bros podcast as well.
And hopefully that's there you are.
Yeah.
The change really is. That's about mental resilience. Just start thinking about what I said. Start looking around and saying, well, how do I not get frightened by that? How could I exploit that?
Yeah.
I'm no psychologist. I can only say, well,
yeah.
Unless you do this, you're going to be a victim of change. So maybe you want to find better people than me to advise you how to do that.
Yeah.
The communication, well, get off your screen all day and start talking to people. Have a conversation with more people. Listen to other people. Pay attention to people that speak. So, and just release that damn absorption into social media and text-based interaction with everyone. Have a chat. Find some mates and talk to them. That's a good starting point.
Sure. I mean, it feels like this was like a masterclass of some sort. I really, learned a ton, and I could also hear Tabang, who's our videographer, on the other side say,
He's smiling.
He's also smiling right now. Andre, if there's anyone that wants to, connect with you and maybe, just to double click on some of the things that you said. I know you're not a social media person, but how can they get in touch? Say, hey, Andre, you said some interesting things on that podcast.
Don't have a Facebook, Twitter account, nothing. I've never had one, etc. And even this particular podcast is because a whole part of other people suggested you should do this because it may be of some value to somebody.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe on an email address.
Yeah. Can you share your email address?
It's Andre. It's Andre. It's my name.
Yeah.
The letter G. So Andre G.
Yeah.
At Edge FM. That's the company. EDGE and then FM.
Yeah.
Foxtrot Mayday. .co.za. I guess. If I get an overwhelmed inbox, well, hell, how about that? We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. But thank you so much, Andre, for making the time and really, letting us in to your world in terms of how you think and how we can also become better human beings. Because I recently also learned a lot. A concept called incivilization. Apparently, we are becoming less and less civil to one another. And I guess also it speaks to just this instantaneous, modes of communications. You jump into a meeting and it's, let's get down to business. There's no, hi, how are you? How are the kids? How is life? Everything we just have to hit it off from the onset. So I think many people will find what you shared. And I guess, is it a call to maybe take a step back, to really understand what this life thing is about?
It's a fair point. Just slow down a little bit,
Yeah.
You only get one life as far as I know. Make of it what you can. And in fact, my parting words to those young men was something that I learned a long time ago.
Yeah.
Someone taught me, if it's to be, it's up to me.
Oof.
It's about you own your future. Stop depending on others. Stop waiting for others. Stop being a victim of it. You own your own future. That future's in your own hands. So what can people do? Well, if it's to be, it's up to you. Take charge of your own life. And you'd be surprised. That's one of the tough things someone can do. Sure. Say, if it's to be, it's up to me. And I've accepted that a long time ago, and my whole career has been in my own hands. And the failures been my own fault.
Wow. I think we're going to leave it right there because we really shared a lot of important, nuggets. And like I said, this felt like a real masterclass, and I'm hoping that our viewers also, will apply some of the things that you shared. It is Youth Month, after all, and but we're taking a different spin, to talk to people that have journeyed, in life and that really understand what this life thing, or have an idea rather of what this life thing is all about and how we can make the most out of it. I can't thank you enough, Andre, for making the time.
Wonderful to be here.
To be with us. And I must say also for your first podcast interview, you did well.
Well, you're a wonderful host, and you made me feel quite comfortable. So, thanks.
Awesome stuff.
Thank you.
Just a reminder to our audience: on the 21st of June, we will be hosting the 4th annual Top 16 Youth-Owned Brands Awards, which are the gold standard of youth excellence, where we celebrate those young people that are not sitting on their laurels, but are taking initiative to build brands and to create employment opportunities for other young people, and who are also, contributing to not only the economy of this country, but the overall image of South Africa. So if you haven't gotten your ticket yet, head over to www.top16yoba.africa and get yourself a ticket. I hope to see you there. And as I always say, inahailal.
Pat. It's Pat on Brands. Watch how you branded, man. A pat on the back is a pat from the man. Better be branded, man. A pat from the pat is a pat on the brand. If it's enormous.